mathematicians. Today we're going to be learning two-step equations. And two-step equations is basically when you solve an equation using two steps. So here I have 8x minus 5 is equal to 19. You'll notice that I have two operations here. So 8 times x minus 5 will equal 19. So our goal, just like in one-step equations, is to isolate our x. We want to get x by itself so that we could find the value of x by itself. So what I'm going to do to make this problem a little bit easier is, because we want the x by itself, we're going to cover this up so that we could get rid of the minus 5. So don't do anything with the 8x. We want to leave that alone because we want the x to be left. So I have 8x minus 5. And since I'm not doing anything with the 8x, I want to cancel out my minus 5. And in order to do so, I do the inverse operation, which instead of subtraction, I'm going to add by 5 on both sides. So I'm going to add 5 here. Whatever you do on one side, you do on the other side. I'm going to add 5 on the right side. So on the left side, I have negative 5 and positive 5 here. And there's 0 pairs because they're opposites. So these two cancel out, and that was my goal. And on the right side, I have 19 plus 5, which is 24. So I know that 8x minus 5 is equal to 19. I could take that sticky note out because I canceled out my minus 5 with a plus 5. And now I could just bring down the 8x. So now I have 8x is equal to 24. And I know that this operation is multiplication because 8 times x in this case is 24. And the inverse operation of multiplication is division. So if I want to isolate x in this case, I'm going to have to divide both sides by 8. So if I divide my left side by 8, so 8x divided by 8, my 8 divided by 8 becomes 1. Instead of writing 1x, I could simply write x. 24 divided by 8 is 3, so x is equal to 3 for this problem. Remember that if you wanted to go back and check to see if your answer was correct, you started off with 8x minus 5, but since we know that x is 3, we could substitute for 3, so 8 times 3 minus 5. 8 times 3 is 24, minus 5 is equal to 19. So this is true, and we know that x is equal to 3 because we went back to check our answer. So here in this problem, I have 1 minus 9x is equal to negative 80. So in this case, again, I want to get the x by itself. We want to isolate our x value. So what I'm going to do the same thing as before. I'm going to cover up that 9x. And so I have 8 minus, let me cover that up too. So I just have 1 here since I covered up my negative 9x. Because here my coefficient is negative 9, I want the x by itself, and negative 9 is being multiplied by x. So here I have 1. And in order to get rid of this positive 1, I'm going to have to subtract by 1 on both sides. So I want to get rid of this because I want negative 9x by itself. So I'm going to subtract by 1, subtract by 1. Positive and negative 1 are 0 pairs, so they cancel out. And negative 80 minus 1 is negative 81. Okay? Now on my left side, since these two canceled out, I'm going to take my sticky note out to see what I had. And I had negative 9x. So by covering the negative 9x with our sticky note, it doesn't confuse you as to whether you should subtract or add 1. Because since this was covered up, all I had was a positive 1. So in order to get rid of that positive 1, we had to subtract. So now I brought down my negative 9x, and I have negative 9 times x is equal to negative 81. And in this case, because it's multiplication, if I want to isolate my x value, I have to divide by -9 on both sides. So -9 divided by -9 is 1. Again, you don't have to write 1x. You could just write x. -81 divided by -9 is just 9, so x is equal to 9. And again, if we want to go back and check our work, we know that we had 1 minus 9 times x. Since we found out that x is equal to 9, we could substitute for x is equal to -80. So here I have 1 minus 9 times 9 is 81. And 1 minus 81 is -80, so this is true, and therefore x is 9. So here for this problem, it's slightly different. We have -6 plus x divided by 4 equals -5. So in this case, we also want to isolate our x value, so we're going to do the same thing we did before. So we have -6 plus x over 4. We could just cover that up. So here I have -6, and in order to get rid of it, to cancel it out, I'm going to have to add 6. And if I add 6 here, then that's my 0 pair. It cancels out. And I'm going to have to do the same thing on the right side. So -5 plus 6. And -5 plus 6 is +1. I'm going to take my sticky note out. I'm going to bring down what I had on my left side, so x over 4. So we have x divided by 4 is equal to 1. And since this is division, we know that the inverse operation is multiplication. So if we multiply by 4 on the left side, these two cancel out. And I'm going to have to multiply by 4 on the right side. So x is equal to 1 times 4, which is 4. And if we want to go back and check our work, we're just going to have to substitute x with 4. So I would have -6 plus 4 divided by 4 is equal to -5. So let's see if that's true. So -6 plus 4 divided by 4 is 1 equals -5. And this is true. So x is definitely equal to 4. So in this next problem, I have x divided by -4 plus 8 is equal to 5. So we're going to do the same thing we've been doing. We have x divided by -4, so we're just going to cover it up. Plus 8 is equal to 5. So in order to cancel out or get rid of this plus 8, we're going to subtract by 8 on both sides. So this is a 0 pair. It cancels out. 5 minus 8 is -3. And we're going to see what's underneath our sticky note. So x divided by -4 is equal to -3. And since this is division, the inverse operation is multiplication. So to isolate our x, we're going to have to multiply by -4 on both sides. So these cancel out, times -4. So x is equal to -3 times -4, which is +12. And here in our problem, if we want to go back and check, we're going to substitute x with 12. So 12 divided by -4 plus 8 is equal to 5. 12 divided by -4 is -3. Plus 8 is equal to 5, so we know that that's true. So here we have a word problem, and it reads, Sally's car broke down, so she took a taxi to work. The taxi fare was $3 per mile, and she gave the driver a $7 tip. Her total cost was $49. What was the distance she traveled? So, if we know that the taxi fare was $3 per mile, 3 We don't know how many miles she traveled, so we're going to use x to represent the number of miles. So 3x. And then she gave the driver a $7 tip, so we're going to add that to how much she spent. And then her total cost was $49. So again, her fare was $3 per mile. We don't know the number of miles, plus the $7 tip, and her total cost was $49. So we're going to have to isolate our x in this case because we want to know what was the distance she traveled, and that's represented by x. So what we're going to do first here is we're going to leave the 3x alone because our goal is to get the x by itself, so we're going to leave it for last. And we're going to subtract by 7 on both sides because we want to know what x is by itself. So we're going to subtract by 7. Since this is a 0 pair, subtract by 7. So now we know that on the left side we only have 3x left over, and 49 minus 7 is equal to 42. So 3 times the number of miles is equal to 42, and so 3 times x is equal to 42, and we're going to do the inverse operation to get the number of miles by itself. So we're going to divide by 3 and then divide by 3. So x is equal to 14 because 42 divided by 3 is 14. And so 14 is how many miles she traveled. If we want to go back and check our work, we're going to do 3 times 14. So we're going to substitute for x. So 3 times 14 plus 7 is equal to 49. So let's see if that's true. 3 times 14 is 42. Plus 7 is equal to 49. So that's true. So she traveled 14 miles to get to work. So here in our next word problem, it reads, a submarine is 214 feet below sea level. The submarine continues to dive down at a rate of 10 feet per minute. If the submarine is currently 464 feet below sea level, how long did it take to descend? So we know that the submarine is 214 feet below sea level, so we're going to use a negative to represent that since it's below sea level, and then it continues to decrease. It will dive down at a rate of 10 feet per mile, so we're going to subtract, since our submarine is going down, by 10. We don't know how many minutes the submarine is going down, so it's going to be minus 10x is equal to, the submarine is currently at 464 feet below sea level, so it's going to equal to negative 464. And here, what we're going to do first is we want the x by itself. So we're going to get rid of the negative 214, and since this is a negative, to cancel it out and get a 0 pair, we're going to have to add 214 on both sides of the equation. So here, this is a 0 pair, so it cancels out, and we're left with negative 10x on the left side. Is equal to, now here, since we have a negative and we're adding a positive, we're going to actually subtract these. So 4 minus 4 is 0, 6 minus 1 is 5, 4 minus 2 is 2. So we're going to have 250 because we have a positive and a negative here. So we're going to subtract when we combine them, and we're going to keep the sign of the one with the greatest absolute value, which is 464, so it's negative. So here we have negative 10x is equal to negative 250, And because this is multiplication, we're going to divide both sides by -10 at -10 to find out what x is equivalent to. So divide by -10, that becomes 1. Divide that by -10, and so x is equal to 25. So it takes 25 minutes for the submarine to descend to 464 feet. So let's check our answer. Again, we're just going to substitute in order to check our answer. So we have -214 minus 10 times 25 is equal to -464. So -214 minus 250 is equal to -464. So our answer is correct. So the submarine took 25 minutes to descend to 464 feet below sea level. Okay? So here our next problem reads, Matilda spent half of her allowance at the mall. On her way home, she found $50 on the ground and now has a total of $174. How much money did she start off with? So we don't actually know how much money she started off with, so that's represented by X. And she spent half of her money, so we're going to divide the amount of money she has by 2. And then on her way home, she found $50. So after she divided her money in half, she found $50 and she now has $174. So here again, we're going to isolate our x and try to get it by itself. And in order to do so, I have to subtract by 50 because we want x over 2 by itself. And then subtract by 50 on this side. So x over 2, or x divided by 2, is equal to, now 174 minus 50 is equal to 124. So here I have x divided by 2 is equal to 124. And since it's division, the inverse operation is multiplication. So we're going to multiply by 2. That cancels out. Multiply by 2. And so x is equal to 248. And that's how much money she started off with. So if we check our answer, we're going to substitute x for 248. And so we have 248 divided by 2 plus 50 is equal to 174. 248 divided by 2 is 124. Plus 50 is equal to 174, so this is right. So she started off with she started off with $248. So another way we could have thought of it, so our equation was x divided by 2 plus 50 is equal to 174. Another way we could have written it is if she spent half of her money, we could represent that just using the fraction half, so half of her money, and we don't know how much money she started off with. And then she found $50 and now has $174. So the reason why these two equations are the same is if you look at our variable here, x is being divided by 2, which is half. And here, x is being multiplied by half. And another way we could also think of it is the coefficient in front of x is 1 over 2 because we have 1x over 2. So this is the same as a half x. So either way works perfectly fine. So in our last problem, Diego has a debt of X dollars for not paying his phone bills. He decides to split the payments among 3 weeks. With his late payments, he also has a fee of $15. If he spends $139 in 1 week, including the late fee on his bills, how much was his debt? So we don't know how much his initial debt was, so we could represent it using X. And we know that he decides to split the payments among 3 weeks. And with that, he also has a fee of $15. So we're going to subtract 15 because he's also losing out on $15. If he spends $139 in 1 week, including the late fee on his bills, how much was his debt? So that's how much he spends for one payment and the fee. And in order to get x by itself, to figure out how much his initial debt was, we have to first add 15 on both sides. So when we have negative 15 and positive 15, those are zero pairs, so they cancel out. And so we're left with x divided by 3 is equal to negative 124. So we know that his weekly cost for these bills without the fee was $124. And in order to get x by itself, we're going to multiply by 3 on both sides. So x is equal to negative 124 times 3. So x is going to equal negative 372, which was how much debt he had for not paying his phone bills. And if we want to go back and check our answer, we're going to take negative 372 divided by 3, subtract 15, and that should equal negative 139. So negative 372 divided by 3 is equal to negative 124. Minus 15 is equal to negative 139, so we know that this is true. So his debt for not paying the phone bills was $372. And that's it.